Welcome to The Pivot, stories of people who made a change. My name is Andrew Osenga, and my guests today are Robert and Lori Crosby. Robert and Lori are a married couple who both do work with children who've been through a lot of trauma. Robert is a researcher, and Lori is a therapist, and their work really intersects together. So they've just written a book together called Trauma-Informed Children's Ministry. They run the Reach Hurting Kids Institute. You can find that at reachhurtingkids.com, and they do these big workshops where they help train teams to minister to kids from hard places. They also offer curriculums that you can use at your churches at your own pace. We get into all kinds of things that they teach at these workshops, and I just love this. I learned so much as a parent, as somebody who works with churches, as just a human. I learned a lot about myself and the way that I think. Robert and Lori are clearly amazing people and really just fun people. It's always amazing when you meet people who work in areas that are so heavy and yet they carry themselves so lightly. And Lori and Robert are people like that. I mean, they work in the area of children's trauma. That's as heavy as it gets. And yet they carry this joy with them. Like we had a fun conversation about ministering to kids who've been through trauma. And I don't know how that happened, but we did. And I feel like I just made two new friends. That's awesome. This was the kind of conversation that I always hoped this podcast could be. I know all of our churches could benefit from these workshops of the Reach Hurting Kids Institute. And we'll put all that stuff in the show notes. And we're going to hear all about it in this amazing conversation with Lori and Robert Crosby. I know we're in different time zones. So where are you living right now?
We live in Rancho Cucamonga, California.
That's a fun word to say.
It is so fun.
That's Southern California. It's about 45 minutes east of Los Angeles and San Bernardino County.
Yeah. How long have you been there?
Gosh, many years. I've lived in the area since 1992.
Yeah, I moved here in 2006.
You guys are experts on the subject of kids who have been informed by trauma. I'd love to know, what are your stories? How did you get into this kind of thing in the first place?
Sure. For me, I started working in ministry at an early age. I was a teenager, and after a couple years, ended up working in special education as a paraeducator. That was the title at the time with LA County Office of Education. And I worked with children in a special school who are diagnosed as severely emotionally disturbed. Don't love the label, but that was the legal label. I think it still is the legal label for that population. And I really enjoyed that work because I saw a lot of space to minister to kids who are struggling with behavior issues. Well, they were there because of behavior issues. They were removed from their classrooms, put into special education programs, eventually removed from their entire districts and put into a county program because their behavioral and emotional challenges were so severe that no one in their entire district could handle them. And as I got to spend time with them, I would learn their stories. And we didn't really have the trauma-informed language so much at the time. But what I learned pretty quickly was that all these kids were coming from tough situations, and that was coming out through the behavior. Mm-hmm. And my heart was really moved by that. And what I think really was God's journey for me, but what felt like a different path at the time was the research program I began. So I was going through my PhD program in educational psychology, and the focus is on quantitative research. So using statistics to study education and to study human behavior. And I had the chance to start doing research in the realm of ministry, in the realm of children's ministry specifically. And then money became available to research trauma as it intersects with ministry. And it wasn't something at the time that I realized I was interested in. I didn't make all those connections. I thought, well, there's money available. We could answer our own research questions while also answering some of these research questions, and that'll make sense. And pretty quickly, I realized this is something that I'm really passionate about, and this is a place where the church can have a huge, huge impact. And so that journey kind of continued from there, learning more, and then eventually wanting to share that information with the community of people who work with kids and serve in the church.
Um, yeah, so I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a registered play therapist, and I have a private practice here in Rancho. And so for me, um, Robert loves research. He did a ton of work researching children's ministries and churches who showed up and served these hurting kids and families well. For me, some of the clients that I was working with in the area were getting kicked out of churches because of trauma-related behaviors, kind of like the 3 strikes you're out rule. Um, and for those children that I was working with, those families, it was incredibly hurtful. And children kind of interpret that as they're not good enough to be in the presence of God. They're not welcome in his place, or yeah, in his house of worship, which broke my heart. And Robert would come home from these research trips and he would share these inspirational stories of these churches who really showed up.
Right, right. Part of the research was getting to actually go and visit
Mhm,
churches that did this well.
mhm,
So I would use statistics to find these outlier churches.
mhm,
For the just work with the schools I talked about, right? These kids were removed from their entire school districts because of behaviors. And so in the same way, kids who are struggling with behavior because of trauma were removed from their churches. And I found these outliers where that wasn't the case. And so I would actually go to those churches and interview the leaders and the families and do focus groups with the kids and observe the services to see what they were doing right that
mm,
allowed these kids to be served.
mhm,
Huh.
mhm. Yeah, so he would come back and we would sit on the floor of the office where we're in right now and just start crying. It was just so incredible to see just how the church can really show up and heal hurting kids and families. And it's like, okay, this is the father heart of God right there. And I really felt the Lord tell us that we needed to write a book. So all of his research is published in peer review journal articles that not a lot of people read, right? Like I didn't even read them myself. Um, just to be honest.
She doesn't read the British Journal of Developmental
I did
Psychology or the
right.
Journal of Child and Adolescent
Right.
Trauma.
Right. My subscription
That's
got delivered to my neighbors.
yeah.
And so
That's
we wrote a book. Robert was like, I don't know if it's going to get published. I don't know if anybody's going to read it. And it got published and people are reading it and it's pretty cool. So, oh,
Lit. And I put it on
yeah,
this
look
on
at
the
there it is.
screen.
Trauma-informed children's ministry. Yeah.
yeah.
So
That's
is
it.
this the first thing that you guys have done together?
Oh, good
Well,
question.
formally, well, I mean, we served in ministry
Oh, yeah.
together.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did missions. That's actually how our personal story, sort of how we fell in love
Mhm.
was.
I'd love to hear it.
Sure, sure. Yes. We'll get into the
So
details.
long. How long is this podcast?
Uh, yeah, well, we worked in together at a Christian school
Mhm,
and connected and became friends there. And Lori was doing missions work in Romania. And I had always wanted to go and serve in Romania. It was something that had been in
mhm,
my heart since I was 14 at a it was like a men's ministry, Promise Keepers. I was
mm,
there
Oh
as a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you remember that. And they had a breakout session and all these things. And they were giving this book away, Tortured for Christ by Richard Wurmbrand, who was a pastor in the underground church. And was just always just fascinated with that story and wanted to go. And Lori
Hmm.
said, "Hey, I'm looking for a co-leader to take a missions team to Romania." And so I said, "Yeah." Well, actually, I didn't say yes. Well, let me pray about it. And I talked to my a pastor friend at the time, like, "Yeah, I've always really wanted to go on a mission trip to
right.
Romania, and there's this girl that invited me to go, and I really, really like her, but I want to go for the right reasons. I don't want to go to be with this girl. I want to know that it really is good." He's like, "You are so stupid. Yes,
Go.
go to Romania." And so we went and we worked together to prepare the trip. We
Mhm.
had our first kiss by a bonfire as the embers were dying and the sun was setting on the fields of the countryside. And
So
it was
romantic.
very then I got really bad allergies, and she'd wanna kiss, and my nose would be running, and I didn't wanna kiss things, so yeah. Yeah, it
Okay.
was
Anyway,
it was fun. So that's what
super fun
happened.
story.
Yeah. This is the first time we've done
Amazing.
a podcast where I've talked about my post-nasal drip.
Super, super fun.
Yeah. This romance brought to you by Afrin. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
That's
So,
hilarious.
okay, so when did you guys
You
get
can edit.
married then?
We got married in 2009. So
Mhm.
Okay.
August 2009. We met in 2007?
7, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, 2007. Yeah. Yeah.
But your work has run alongside each other this whole time.
Yeah.
It really has.
It's crazy.
Our personal and ministry and professional
Hmm.
backgrounds, and then getting into the research. The organization that we did the Romania missions work with, we kind of stayed in contact. I mean, not that much. We did 3 trips and then sort of drifted. And by then, I was into my PhD program and was really fascinated by psychometrics, which is just measuring abstract ideas like spirituality and belonging and these kind of things. And I got this call from the leaders of this organization that I really hadn't been in contact with. It's been a while, years, and they reached out and said, "Hey, we really believe that God wants us to meet with you." And they're down in Temecula, which is about 2 hours below. What 2 hours?
Yeah.
About an hour, and it depends on traffic. Hour and change. So it was going to be a little bit of a drive to meet up. And so, well, if God wants us to meet, who am I to defy the Lord? And so we meet up, and they had in mind that the reason that we were supposed to meet was because they have a job opening for a short-term mission
Mm,
director. And so they thought, oh, we must be meeting him to pitch this job so that he can have it. And we get there and they're so excited and they pitch this job, and I couldn't have less interest. And it wasn't one of those, I said no, but the Lord. No, it was just it was
yeah.
dead on arrival. And
Yeah.
then we stared at each other awkwardly because we didn't really know each other. There wasn't that much history, and now their pitch had fallen flat. And they sort of just started talking to each other while I was just eating my food. And I overheard them say something about this foundation that normally gave them grant money, said that they wouldn't give them more money until they could evaluate their mission statement, which was empowering, let's see, transforming children in Christ through his church. And they said, well, you can't evaluate spiritual transformation in these things. And so I don't know. I've been taking these classes on how to measure these really abstract things. And it launched a conversation, ultimately a 10-plus year research program, ultimately. And that
Yeah.
veered into the trauma piece. How
Hmm.
does the church minister to kids from trauma,
Yeah.
and care for them?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I want to get into this, and I'll say the first thing that struck me was I'd never heard the word trauma informed before, and I'm
Mhm.
sure this is a familiar phrase to you, but the phrase I've always heard is traumatized.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, so what does trauma informed mean? Like what is packed into that phrase?
Yeah, well, so trauma informed is gonna describe the people who are working with the people from trauma. So it wouldn't just necessarily describe the
Oh,
victim,
okay.
but those who are working with the victim. Now, the victim can also be trauma informed. I'm precluded from that.
Right.
Okay.
So it would mean, basically what it means is you realize that trauma is out there. This is common and it impacts people in a really profound way, in a long-term
Yes.
way. So
Yeah.
our work is focused on kids. So we'd say a lot of kids have experienced potentially traumatic events.
Hmm.
A lot of them are struggling, and that behavior is being manifest in church or wherever.
Hmm.
And then recognizing those signs and symptoms and saying, okay, when this kid is arguing or when this kid is crying or throwing things or whatever it is, these are symptoms and signs that a child's struggling internally, not that they're choosing to be defiant and misbehaved.
Right.
And then being able from there to respond in a way that's healing and that helps
Right.
them succeed. So that's kind of not re-traumatizing, not making things worse, right?
Yes.
So that's in a nutshell what it means to be trauma informed. But that would describe those who are
Right.
caring for the
Who
victim.
carrying, yeah. So like a trauma informed ministry leader recognizes like the signs and symptoms of trauma. So if a child is hiding under a desk or they're dysregulated and screaming, I hate you, I wish you would die, the leader doesn't personalize the child's emotional dysregulation, but walks alongside them, shows up, sits with them maybe very quietly until the child is regulated, and then can walk alongside to help them just heal from whatever they're going through and help them get regulated, help them feel safe, help them feel connected,
Mhm,
help them feel
mhm.
valued. So that's kind of what we mean by that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. And so this is what you call a trauma-informed approach, right? And
Mhm.
so how do you teach this to churches? When you guys go in and you are working with a church or an organization, what does it look like? What are some of the core things that you're trying to leave them with?
So we began speaking at churches
Mhm,
ourselves. Now we do a lot at conference. So we do a lot of the children's ministry conferences, and our
mhm,
team spends time there. And we developed a curriculum actually
mhm,
because we were being asked to go to so many churches that a lot of them were out of state, and it just wasn't going to be practical. We have kids and jobs and everything. So we actually created a self-guided curriculum that ministry leaders now use themselves
mhm,
to take their teams through it.
mhm,
But the things I just talked about, so the realizing, the recognizing, the responding, that's basically the framework,
mhm,
and teaching them to connect the behaviors to underlying feelings.
mhm,
We try not to get too hung up on the the traumatic events themselves.
mhm,
People want to dig into the nitty-gritty, and they wanna know, if they know about what happened,
mhm,
if you bring a kid into the classroom at church and you say, "Just to let you know, his mom died last month, and he's devastated, so if his behavior seems off, that's why," right? If people know that, then they're very compassionate and sympathetic. So if this kid were to disengage or cry or refuse to participate or
mhm,
fight with you or something, oh, well, I understand
mhm,
he's
Yeah,
dealing
yeah.
with something. But we usually don't know that they're dealing with something. They just show up and we see the aftermath. And so the idea is to teach people to see the aftermath and just treat them as though they're in a traumatic situation. So if I see a kid doing any of these things, which I would be compassionate towards, if I need just assume they're coming out of a traumatic situation, assume they're wrestling with something that you don't know about,
mhm,
and then respond accordingly. And that means, what is the underlying feeling? How can I minister to that? How can I help them be okay so
mhm.
that they can participate and engage and feel part of a community and feel loved, and ultimately so that the church can be part of that child's healing process.
Yeah,
The process sounds like it takes a lot of patience.
yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
It does, but changing your thinking
Mhm,
goes so far.
mhm,
We have had so many people tell us when they've used the workshop, they've used the materials with their teams, they've had people, a lot of times it's someone who's older and they're so used to a very old-fashioned way of doing things that they're resistant at first, but when they make those connections, they're moved.
mhm,
Um, they say, "Oh, okay, I get it." Now I because you can't really help it. I mean, honestly, when you make those connections, if right, again, or if you just said the example, the mom dies. Yeah, this
Yeah.
boy's mother died last month. He could do about anything, and although it might be challenging, and we're not going to just allow him to do anything, but we're going to be wired to be compassionate having that information. So switching our mindset and just
Yeah.
saying, okay, something's going on. I don't know what it is, but clearly this kid's struggling. This isn't about me. This isn't about our program. I don't
mhm,
need to be defensive or angry or punitive. I just
mhm,
need to sort of do a little bit of detective work to see what is the underlying feeling, not what happened. We don't need to
mhm.
know what happened necessarily, but what is this child feeling so we can minister to that and just help them be okay. And through that we share the gospel.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. That's such a that's such a beautiful way of modeling the gospel. In your mind, um, how does this model the gospel to you? This approach?
So we talk about like the implicit gospel.
Mhm,
So you can do you can share God's love um honestly more powerfully um by sitting down next to a hurting child and maybe just having a conversation, just checking in with them, maybe while you're building with Legos. Um, maybe sitting down and sharing a meal. Like if
mhm,
they're hungry, they didn't have breakfast, instead of, sticking with, well, we have snack time at this time, but the
mhm,
kid's hungry now and we're supposed to
mhm,
do teaching time now. It's like, well, switch the schedule and meet this child's need. And so sitting down and eating and just showing them Jesus through like
Mhm.
genuine connection, like really being interested in their lives and being curious and open and um being present, that speaks so deeply to, I think, all of us, not just children,
Mhm.
but all of us. Um, and that's really powerful. And I feel like sometimes ministry leaders, we kind of get stuck in, well, we do this now, and
Mhm.
then we do this, and then this, and it's
Well,
I
it's
need to
hard because
teach it.
you have a program.
Yes, you got the
It's a
Yeah,
program.
hard
It's
job,
very,
it's
and
a
very
hard job.
you spend so much time and energy coming up with your program, and you planned your lesson. You might have spent hours and
Mhm.
hours and hours planning that,
Yeah,
and you had to get your volunteers to show up, and then, they're there,
yeah.
and then all of a sudden you have this kid, and what they need is not your program.
Mhm.
And it's like, "Oh, man, I love this kid, but can't they just get with the program? It worked." But it just the reality is sometimes that's just not what they need. Maybe what they need is to pass out the snacks in the kindergarten room, or to
Mhm.
just sit outside
Mm,
and take some space, or to go for a
Mhm.
walk with the leader and talk about
Mhm.
their week, to have a snack. That it's There's often a disconnect between what we have planned and what the child actually needs,
Yeah.
and so we have to have the freedom to say, "Okay, I'm prepared, but we've got to pivot, we've got to adapt so that we can
Mhm.
minister to them."
Yeah.
One thing we found in the research is there's a correlation between the way a child understands and experiences the church
Mhm.
and the way they understand and experience God. So
Mhm.
we're a proxy for God in that way. So
Mhm.
if a child says, "I was hungry," and someone at the church gave them something to eat, it's as though Jesus is feeding them, as though the
Mhm.
Lord's feeding
Mhm.
them.
Yeah.
that's so obvious when you say it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like, of course. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, you immediately got me thinking through my entire childhood by that statement you just said,
Mhm.
Robert. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the reality is you've got a classroom of 20 kids who are doing the thing that the leaders have said to do,
Yeah.
and you've got two volunteers who have
Mhm.
their own things going on and are
Mhm.
tired and have
Mhm. Sure.
barely looked at the thing that somebody
Mhm.
prepared for them,
Mhm.
Right. Absolutely.
and they're not trained counselors.
Mhm.
No.
They're, it's you got a lawyer and a stay-at-home mom,
Mhm.
and they're going, "What do we do with this kid?"
Mhm.
When I've been volunteering
Mhm.
down in the church basement, that's usually that's the case,
Right.
and I go, "I don't know."
Absolutely.
Um, it's not like we have this time to go, "Okay, we can just stop everything and take care of this one child." It's like it's a quick spur of the moment thing. So it's wonderful that churches take the time to go through this curriculum and train the volunteers and their staffs to do this. Um, what has been the response from churches and from organizations when they've gone through this? Like, how do they react? Because often I'm going to imagine they have to reorient their curriculums. They might have to rebuild a lot of these programs. They might cost them money. It's definitely going to take them time. They got to know when they're going to invest in your curriculum. It might cost them something if they're going to actually implement it.
There there is an investment. The feedback is immediate and positive
Mhm. Yeah.
because it works,
Yeah.
and it works quickly.
Mhm.
I love
Um,
that.
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to, and you have someone who is resistant. "Well, I'll just try it, I guess, so I can say I did, and then it didn't work, and I can go," and they'll say, "Oh, wow, the next day, I started using some of these things, and the response was very strong."
Mhm.
And it's not to say that the healing process is immediate, but you begin to see
Of
shifts
course.
in
Yeah.
how kids respond very quickly. There's so many things we do that create power struggles, for example.
Mhm.
There's
Mm.
some rigid thinking we come
Can,
into.
can you give me some examples?
Yeah, so, I mean, big picture is that traditional classroom management. I'm just gonna scoot that over
Sorry.
'cause my chair's a little squeaky here. Traditional classroom management is based on the psychological principle of behaviorism. So this was developed back in the 1950s by B.F. Skinner, who's known for this, and he created these little boxes for training rats. and the rat would pull a lever and a little feed pellet would come out, and they kind of evolve this, and you could use this to train animals to perform on stage, and so essentially it's reward and punishment to shape behavior. And so for generations, classroom management in an educational setting has been based on these principles that you reward or acknowledge behavior you want to see increased, and you ignore or you punish behavior that you don't want to see. And so this is what is in the classroom traditionally, and this is what's taken to the churches traditionally, right? So there's a lot of problems with it, and it works. It does a lot of things well for typically developing kids.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason it's been used a lot and for generations and generations, but there's some major holes in this approach. And one big one is that it assumes that the child has control over their behavior. So when a child it assumes that they know the right thing to do,
Right.
which many kids come into church and they don't
know.
necessarily even cognitively know this is what I'm supposed to do. They may not have that culture, the tradition, the knowledge, but also assumes that they're physically, emotionally capable of it. And so they may know, okay, I'm supposed to sit still and listen and understand this and engage in this way, but their body, their mind, their emotions aren't allowing them to do that. And so when they're in that place, it doesn't matter what reward or punishment you hold over their head, they're not able to respond to it. And I remember this, I mentioned working in special education. We had point sheets, and that was the primary behavior management approach where they were called point sheets. And they were blocked into, I want to say, 15-minute blocks. And then if the child behaved well for that 15 minutes, they would get so many points. And then they would have a level. So the next day, the level they were on, which dictated their privileges, would be based on their points the previous day.
Would not have done well.
Yeah. So that makes certain assumptions it's based on behaviorism.
Yeah.
And what would happen is these kids, who I think probably all of them were coming from traumatic backgrounds, something would trigger them, and the kid would have an outburst. They would lose control of themselves. And so the adult, well, hey, if you throw that, you're going to lose a point, or if you don't get back to work, you're not going to earn your point. And they didn't understand. They didn't care because they were out of control. And so they're losing points, and it was completely useless. And then it really just compiled. It really compiled the problem because they knew. They knew the right thing to do cognitively, and they wanted to do it. I mean, all kids want to do well.
Right.
No kid wants to be the bad kid. No kid wants to be on level 1 on their point sheet, right? I mean, who walks in to say, I want to be on the red sticker today? They want to do well. So then when they don't, it builds the shame on them. They begin to feel guilt. And they begin to feel, shame. Shame in the sense of like, I'm a bad kid. I'll never get it. I can never do right. And this is building up on them. And so behaviorism does nothing for that. It doesn't address relationship.
And relationship is the trauma-informed strategy.
Exactly. So really relationship's the foundation of this entire approach. It's getting to know the kids and building rapport and letting them know that they're loved and they're accepted and unconditionally cared for. This is what's transformative. And behaviorism misses all of that. And it's also very short term. Behaviorism is about short term behavior change, and trauma informed care is about long term heart change.
Yeah.
So the example I use, if you're driving down the freeway, I don't know if our audience has freeways, the highway. You're driving down a busy, fast street, and then you're going too fast, and a police officer pulls on beside you. You slow down. There's a cop. I better slow down and drive the speed limit, right? Because we're afraid of being punished. That's behaviorism, right?
Yeah.
The threat of punishment looms. There's a good chance of it if I just am zipping by this guy, but he pulls off the road or off the freeway, and immediately we go back to going the speed we were going before.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I don't know anything you're talking about. I've never done that.
No, never.
Yeah.
Us sinful people will behave in this way. Reward. It's ironic because the bigger a reward you attach to something, the less likely the person is to continue that behavior once the reward goes away.
Yeah.
So if you have kids in church and you're giving them ice cream parties and tickets and Bible bucks and all these things, if they memorize verses and show up and behave well and all these things, you take that away and you say, hey, son, where's your Bible? Well, they're not giving me tickets for bringing my Bible anymore, so what's the point? So you're undermining intrinsic motivation. You're failing to build a relationship. You're not actually changing someone's heart. So we miss all this. And then you get back to the original question.
Power
Power
struggles.
struggle is if you're interacting with a kid, like you need to do this, or you're going to be punished, or if you do this, I'll give you a reward. That's controlling, right? That's not internal motivation. That's external motivation. And a child who's been abused, they have learned that I can't trust authority, or when I'm not in control, bad things happen, or when other
Yeah.
people try to control me, bad things happen. I'm in danger. And so their body reacts to that threat. And so they push back. And so that creates a struggle that doesn't end well for anyone. That's not the position you want to be in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Man, there's a lot there. Well, now, Lori, if I can, I want to change the subject a little bit. And this is not what you talk about in your book, but this is where you work, which is in, marriage and family. The concepts that you're talking about are in the book are all towards the church, but these same concepts, I'm sure, are related to families. So if people are listening to this and they're like, well, I don't volunteer at my church. I don't work in, in the classroom setting, but I got 2 kids.
Mhm.
How does this stuff apply as a parent? Does this stuff apply as a parent?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. So I'm actually a trauma specialist, so I specialize in specifically working with kids who've experienced trauma.
Wow.
But that absolutely includes families, whether adoptive parents, foster parents, biological parents. So working with the family. So I teach a lot of these trauma-informed strategies. So again, not using behaviorism. That's also a very popular, like, parenting tool, right? Like, when you're
Oh,
potty training,
counting to 5. Oh,
right? If you pee in the potty, you get a M&M, you get a sticker on the
yeah.
potty chart, like, and I'm not saying
Or the
that's all
chore charts and
right, chore charts, like, and I'm not saying those are all, like, wrong, but for the population I work with, like, neurotypically developing children, yeah, it can be very helpful. But with children who are struggling with, um, having experienced a traumatic event, abuse, of any kind, um, it usually leads to these power struggles. So with the families, like, I will teach them emotion regulation techniques. We'll talk about understanding, like, some simple neurobiology, like understanding in a very simplistic way upstairs brain versus downstairs brain. So when you are dysregulated, you are in your downstairs brain. So that's the limbic system, that's the brain stem. So there is where, like, we have freeze, fight, flight. So when we feel threatened, we go to our downstairs brain and we're in survival. When you're in that place, you cannot communicate clearly. You have no access to logic and reason. That's your
some of the verbal parts of your brain actually shut down.
Yes, absolutely. So the prefrontal cortex is in charge of all of that. That's not online, so to speak, when you're dysregulated. When you're in the middle of a meltdown,
To dysregulate it is really upset,
yes, very,
scared,
very upset.
angry, sad,
Yes.
at a level that you're heavily affected by it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. When you're
So
crashing out, as my teens would say.
yes,
Yeah.
crashing
As
out.
as you're
Absolutely.
crashing
Yes.
out.
Exactly. And so parents, we sometimes want to lecture our kids out of an
Mhm,
emotional meltdown.
mhm.
That's not effective. They're not here. They can understand reason when they're here, but when they're in their downstairs brain, there's nothing really you can do or say that's going to talk somebody out of a meltdown. You have to write it out. There has to be patience. The parent themselves has to be emotionally calm. Like, we have to be regulated. You can co-regulate. Like, if I'm doing a deep breathing strategy, just with my mouth quiet, like, the more a parent talks to a kid, usually the more dysregulated they get. So if you can just be quiet, do your own breathing, because we're, as parents, we can get upset too. We have emotions, but you don't want a dysregulated adult engaging a dysregulated child. That
Mhm.
just leads to explosions. So, even bigger explosions. So, regulating yourself and then helping or modeling how to regulate. And then when your child is regulated, give it some more time and then talk about what happened. being able to call out emotion, helping children identify, oh, you got really angry.
Mhm.
Tell me about that. What happened? So asking open-ended questions, validating the emotion. Well, I could get angry. I would understand being
Mhm.
angry about that. It's okay to feel
Mm.
angry.
Yeah, that's, she's talking about the relationship piece. So
Yes.
we talk about a strategy when we train teams called, the 3 Cs, calm, care, coach. And when you're in a situation that's really difficult, and it absolutely would apply, it's not just at church, but
Mhm,
well, that's what I use with the kids at home.
mhm,
So calm is just what Lori was talking about. They're calm and we're calm before we go any further. That's the priority. So if the kid's flipping out,
yeah.
or if they're flipping out, you might be flipping out too. I get really mad, and so I might need to give myself a timeout.
Yes.
You don't want to sit there and do discipline when you're furious,
No.
which
Yeah.
is which is hard not to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Really,
And to be clear, what you're saying, this is not disciplining people. This is not no rules. This is,
Correct.
that's
yeah.
a big
Mhm.
big misconception
Yes.
that's come up recently.
Yes.
It's almost been this pushback to the idea of trauma-informed care, and the misunderstanding is that this is what was it, gentle parenting,
Mhm,
no limits, no
mhm.
saying no.
Which is
Yeah, I
the
just
All
saw
opposite.
a headline of that yesterday
That's not it.
morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
all we care about is however they're feeling, that
Mhm.
like the idea that feelings are in charge
Mm,
is not the case.
mm,
Feelings are important, feelings matter, feelings are going to help us have a roadmap to healing
yes.
and better behavior. But it's not, well, you're angry, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
It's that we're going to learn to navigate that. So she
Yes.
mentioned the regulation, so calming, and then care, which Lori was kind of talking about too, is I always say find out their point of view.
Mhm,
Find out what's going on. Like stop before you get, because we just want to jump into here's what you did wrong, here's what you need to be doing, here's why that's wrong, here's why that. But okay, walk me through what happened. So we're calm now. Hey, you were throwing things or you were yelling or they got hit. Just tell me what happened,
mm,
right? And then you kind of hear out where they're coming from. And now you'll just find you're in a completely different place.
mhm,
You're not upset. You have some level of empathy. Like, oh, okay. You'd been working on you were building this Lego thing for the entire like week you've been working on this and you're so excited about it and you really wanted to show daddy what you made and then someone walked in the room and they stepped on it. And you thought they did it on purpose and you're so furious because it's just ruined all this hard work you did and you're so disappointed and you're so sad because you wanted to share it with daddy.
mhm,
Well, now, yeah, it's still not okay to hit your sister, but there's so much more understanding.
mhm,
And then that's where we go into we use the word coach is okay, let me teach you, and that's what I think discipline is. And
mhm,
let me walk you through this journey. I know you don't want to be a violent person. You don't want to hurt
mhm,
people. So how do we handle this situation? How do we curtail this? Consequences.
mhm,
So punishment is I'm going to make you suffer because it's just you made them suffer. Now I'm going to make you suffer. You made me suffer, and I'm going to make you
Old
suffer.
Testament. Yeah.
yeah.
But discipline, consequences is it could be the natural consequences. So you call this person a terrible name, and now they don't want to play with you, and I'm not going to make them play with you because you
Mhm,
really hurt their feelings. It can be restorative consequences, which are a beautiful thing, and that's
mhm,
Mm.
apologizing, doing something to make it
mhm,
right. You broke her this, so
mhm,
now we're going to let's fix it. You're going to be involved in fixing that, or drawing. For him, it was making like an apology picture.
mhm.
I'm sorry, and there's a picture, and that's the road to actually restoring the relationship,
Right.
and the process of learning how to handle these things. We, as the parent or caregiver or teacher, can start to see the signs. Okay, he's starting to get upset. We know where to intervene.
Mhm,
And so the idea is we're taking them to a place where they're handling things correctly. So it's behaviorism is short-term behavior change, trauma-informed care is long-term heart change, and then building these skills over time.
right.
So we're and it just works better.
Yeah.
So they say, well, you should just stop the behavior. I'm like, well, if you scream at them and you threaten them and punish them, guess what? It's going to happen again tomorrow, and it's going to happen again the next day. You're
And you're
not.
modeling screaming and yelling.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't the thing is it doesn't work. I mean, I talked to someone who
I say
spanks.
you, I say I have modeled screaming
Oh,
and
yes.
yelling or
Yeah.
whatever,
Oh,
Well,
let's
sure,
be
yeah.
honest.
The general you, us person. Yeah, so someone, if you use these punitive strategies, you're going to find, you're doing them over and over and over and over again.
yeah.
I mean, really super punish our kids, but they're good. Like, ask their teachers, they're well behaved, they're good kids. It's not that we're letting them run wild and act all
They love
crazy.
rules, actually.
Yeah.
That does, yeah, I should say this. Yeah, our kids are the same. Like we have had to discipline not a ton
Yeah, it's
These
for
are the
kind
rules,
of that
these are the
same. It's
boundaries,
kind of the
right?
same reason, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're helping them build the skills because kids, what they say, kids will do as well as they can.
Mhm.
Kids
Hmm.
want to do well. Kids want to behave. Kids want to please the adults in their lives that care about them. They want to do well in school. So to walk into the situation and assume they're choosing to be defined or choosing to behave poorly is typically not the case.
Right.
Okay, so you're in your book you mentioned this a couple times that good intentions are not enough. I say a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who are
Mhm.
working in churches really mean well,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but blank and blank has happened. But they do
Right.
blank and blank. What are some of the most common mistakes or misconceptions that you see churches or organizations, schools, whatever, that are making when they're working with children who have experienced trauma?
Mm.
Yeah. So some of the things we've mentioned, a behaviorist approach, a
Yeah.
reward,
Yes.
using rewards, which can be sometimes is not effective and sometimes is counterproductive if they feel like they're being controlled.
Mhm.
Wanting to teach them and guide them too soon in the process. So the kid does something wrong. Well, Jesus doesn't want us to act like that. That wasn't very Christ-like of you, or that wasn't what God wants. And yes, but it's at the wrong time, and it's piling on shame and, teaching them, focusing on, well, this is wrong. God says this is wrong. And what can happen, I work with teenagers in this boat, is that like they know something's wrong. They understand that it's sin, but they're struggling with this cycle because they haven't developed the emotion regulation skills. And so to them, they're this perpetual hopeless sinner in the sense of, I just keep doing this over and over and over again. I'm a bad Christian. God can't love me or accept me. The church doesn't want me because I keep doing these things again and again and again. And so the intention may be good. I'm teaching you right from wrong. I'm bringing the biblical truth into the situation. I'm trying to reward good behavior, and all these things are well
Mhm.
intentioned,
Mhm.
but they can be positively counterproductive.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, maybe in that light, for you guys personally, in your work, in your research, and this is sort of a pivot question, but when you look back at the work that you've done, and even your own parenting, what what are some things that you used to maybe believe was the right approach that now you are like, oh, maybe I see this differently now that we've done this research, or now that just you've got this experience of both parenting and the work that you've done? Maybe you're like, no, we nailed it.
Well, the point sheet idea.
Hmm.
I was young. I mean, something still felt off about
When you
That
were
was
so
your that
young.
was your idea?
No.
No, it wasn't my
Oh,
idea,
oh,
but it was part of the system. I mean, that's what everyone did. That was
yeah,
part of the
Mhm.
system, and I was this low-level paraeducator, and the
yeah,
psychologists and the school psychologists and the trained therapists and the experienced teachers and administrators. Everyone was bought into this. Oh, this must be right. This must be what you're supposed to do. And then learning, I think later on that wasn't the right approach. Um,
yeah.
Conversely, I think sometimes we over spiritualize things.
Mm,
So if you have anxiety, someone struggling with anxiety or depression, and we know scriptures, the perfect love casts all fear, and be anxious about nothing, and these types of verses. But there's so much nuance and there's so much baggage that a child's bringing in. I mean, these are defense mechanisms. And so if a child has experienced or is still currently under threat, and we're trying to sort of pray away or theologize, is that a word? Or theologically correct their fear or their behaviors, which are protecting them from harm, like actively protecting them. That's not helpful,
Right.
at
yeah,
all. It's
So for
yeah.
me, like speaking into that, just, I mean, personally and professionally, there has been a lot of people that have been hurt by like the church and the Christianese and the things that are
mm,
people having that well intention of God's. This is my makes me so sick to say. God's not going to give you more than you can handle. I mean, that's one of the most common misquoted scriptures that just do unfathomable harm to somebody who's in the midst of trauma,
Yeah.
in the midst of grief, in the midst of depression, anxiety. Just it's just does so much harm. I mean, just like personally for me, when I was 14, my best friend had an acute asthma attack, and she passed away. And
Gosh.
so, like, while she was in the coma for the 2 days that she was in a coma, like, I was on the floor and I was crying and praying and just begging God for her life. Um, I prayed so hard and I believed so hard that he would save her. And that was there was a no. And she passed away. Um and after that, I mean, I had very complicated grief. I was very depressed. I struggled with suicidal ideation. My dad was military, and so we moved 8 months after this traumatic incident. And during that time, it was a small town in Nebraska where we lived, and everybody knew, um, about what had happened. And there was, definitely comments that the Lord needed another angel in heaven, and so that's why he snatched up my best friend and took her for his angel army. I mean, just and people say things in comfort, but it's hard. And so for me, I couldn't pray away the depression. I couldn't pray away the
Mhm.
trauma. And I tried. I tried so
Mhm.
hard. I
Yeah.
tried so,
Yeah.
so, so hard. But it took it took therapy. I did lots of therapy.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It took a lot of time. Um,
Hmm.
and I think too, like some miracles can happen instantly, but
Mhm.
also sometimes the miracle is the journey. Like the very
Mm.
long,
Wow.
painful journey we walk can be the miracle. Like if I hadn't experienced what I experienced as a child, I would not be here. Like, and so the Lord did a work and he's still doing a work and he gets the glory for everything. But, you know, I think that's maybe the pivot, the shift is like,
Huh.
you know, the miracle is not instant sometimes. The miracle is sometimes the journey.
Yeah. So can I ask a follow-up question to that? Um, how do you help, or have you had to help kids who've dealt with that kind of spiritual trauma? Have kids come to you who've had those things said to them, who have those questions about God, that you've had to walk through?
Yeah,
How do you
absolutely.
help them?
I listen. Um, I hear their pain. Um, I ask open-ended questions, for them just to share as much as they can about it. Um, and then when the timing is right, I try to speak like comforting truth into the situation that they're talking about. Like the Lord is not snatching people up for his angel army. Like that's not what happened. And just saying, I don't know why your
Mhm.
mom passed
Yep.
away. I don't know why you are going through what you are going through, but I will sit here with you in this pain and we will sit in silence and they will cry. And sometimes I cry. Um, and just being present in the pain, I think, is what is the most helpful because you don't get to do or say anything that takes away somebody's pain. We
Yeah.
desperately want to, but the best thing to do is just to sit in silence and to be a loving presence who listens.
It's really beautiful.
I
I
don't
don't
know
know. I don't
what
know what I want to ask after that. That's just so beautiful and resonant. I know I have dealt with some of those kinds of things. I've had so many friends that have dealt with
Right.
so much of that, and it's so painful.
It is. It is.
Yeah. And I love that you've given voice to that in such an eloquent way. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, well, I would love to know, what was the process for you guys of deciding to write this book together, and what was it like for you to take your two works, which are, like we talked about, running side by side,
Mhm.
but to sit down together side by
Mhm.
side
Mhm. Yeah.
and to think, how can we put this in one book, to
Mm.
be able to help
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
um, just between the two? How was that process? Was that fun? Was that
It was
not
sometimes
fun? Was
fun,
it?
and it was sometimes really hard and stressful. Like, I mean, Robert really didn't believe me at first when I was like, "I hear the Lord saying write a book," and he's like, "I don't know," and I was like, "I think we gotta do it," and then we literally were sitting like this, and he's on the computer, the keyboard, and we would just be verbally processing ideas.
So you literally wrote it together. You weren't like, I'll do this chapter, you do that chapter.
No,
You
no, I mean,
wrote it
Robert
together.
Yeah, well, and Robert did a lot of the writing, a lot of, like, the
The
typing.
typing.
He's brilliant. He had all the stories because it was like, we love it because it's not necessarily us. Like, these are stories that
Yeah.
from interviews that actually happened. Like, we got to elevate the voices of these incredible ministry
Yeah.
leaders
Well, and the
who
kids
did the work.
got the kids, 'cause I got to talk to them face to
Mhm,
face and sit across from, how was she at the time? Maybe she was 10. They're older now, of course, but
mhm,
Mm.
um, sitting across from a little girl whose older brother experienced, their whole family experienced a lot of trauma, and she internalized, so she would shut down and cry,
mhm,
and he externalized, he would blow up. And they were in foster care for a while, and then ended up with their grandmother, and she wanted to bring them to church, and he couldn't keep it together in a typical church, and they would be asked to leave again and again. I mean, they were kicked out of countless churches. And to hear from this little girl's mouth what it feels like to be kicked out of a church over and over and over and over, I think was the metaphor she used. She said something like, it's like we were alone in the dark and no one could see us. And then when they found a church that knew how to respond, there was a level of trauma informed um, ministry going on, and what it was like to finally be accepted, to finally be
mhm,
welcome, to finally
mhm,
be part of a community, and how that opened the
mhm,
door to them being
mhm.
baptized and building a relationship with God and growing in their faith. And it was so powerful to hear
Mhm,
over and over and over, and the different elements of the
mhm.
ministry that could play into this, whether it be worship or small groups, and different ways teaching was used in really profound ways.
Yeah.
Um, the way play was used, that was a big piece. It was just, we just had to we just had to platform these
Right.
voices, and kids with no status and no position, no power whatsoever, just hearing their stories and saying, I'm going to put you on a national stage, and people around the country, people around the world are going to hear your voice, and they're going to learn from what you experienced, and we're going to create spaces like the one that where you ultimately found, and we're going to have fewer spaces where kids like you are thrown out.
Right. Right.
Well, Robert, I'd love to hear about that. Because you are primarily doing research, right? Like, what does this research look like? How do you research this stuff?
Mhm.
Uh, Like, what does that look like? Are you wearing a lab coat? Do you have a, you know, microscope? I mean, like, what are you doing?
Mhm. I don't want to get too technical. We'll
You
people. If
also,
someone
and
has,
I literally grabbed my notebook and wrote the word down, psychometrics, because I'm like, what is that word? You said it, and I was like, that's the coolest word.
I mean, it
This may or may
literally
not
means
be
measurement.
psychometrics.
Yeah,
Psychometrics.
it literally means a measurement of the soul
I was
would
gonna
be
call
the,
you later and be like, "Will you talk to me for an hour about psychometrics?" Because I just want to
yeah,
know
and
everything.
if
It
there,
would be so fun for you guys.
yeah, if there's people in the audience who are interested in the nitty gritty, there are,
Mhm.
you could go to our website, reachhurtingkids.com, and there's a research tab,
Yeah,
and
you got a whole list of all of these
yeah,
research
you can
papers.
find, you can, and some people do, few,
Very few, but some.
and they're doing ministry. There's a lot of people who are in academia. I mean, these things are quoted in textbooks and things.
Yes.
Yeah,
but typically your ministry leaders aren't accessing this content. It wouldn't be terribly accessible
Well,
for them.
it's because it's trickle down, right? You do the research, and that
Well, that's
finds its
normally
way
the
into like the
process.
books, like you writing that are more public. Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's the normal process in academia, right? You publish articles and those get put into textbooks and eventually those get picked up by schools of, in this case, schools of ministry. And then, people learn
yeah,
that and that, maybe go on, they get a job. And so there's this long sort of generational, which is really important and helpful. But we wanted to cut the line and say, no, this is too urgent. I want this in the hands of
yeah.
people who can use this now.
Right.
But as far as the research goes, a lot of survey research. So one study that I think was particularly interesting was it was a national study that was done with the Church of the Nazarene. We have connections in that denomination, and
Yeah.
somebody we're working with was friends with the person who ran the denomination at the time and was able to make those connections. And we created this survey, and one of the key instruments was called the Kids Church Survey. So this is something that our team developed over a long period of time, which is a reliable and valid measure of a sense of church belonging. And so how connected does a kid feel at church? Do they feel loved? Do they feel valued? Do they feel like they're part of the community? Do they feel loved by their peers, loved by adults? Do they get to share about their lives and have these meaningful transformative experiences? And so we have this quantitative measure that works for kids, which is, it's a big deal. And then we had all these other things that we wanted to know, what can churches do to create this? Because people have different ideas, and it's based on what they've experienced personally or their own personal theology or what the mega church is doing. But it's not empirical, meaning it's not scientific. There's no scientific evidence that this works. It's just what people say. So we came up with everything we could of all the things that a church could be doing, or elements of the church or the family that could be contributing to this. And the results were quite fascinating, really unexpected. A lot of it had to do with worship and play that that's beyond the scope of probably what we're talking about now, but things you can do in those arenas that are really powerful.
Want to know
Um,
all these things. You're just piquing all my interests. Okay, but
Sure.
continue. Yeah,
And one of the biggest takeaways, though, in the family is really relevant, right? If you're coming from a Christian family that's active in the church, you've been part of the
Right.
church a long time, right? That's expected. Gender and age, girls are more connected than boys, in general. But the one that was the big takeaway was the child's behavior, and if they exhibited externalizing or just basically antisocial problem behaviors that are associated with trauma, symptoms of trauma, then that was a huge barrier that prevented them from connecting with the church. And we also learned ultimately connecting with God. And so across the board, you would see the higher the child's trauma response, the lower the level of connection, right? So if you imagine a graph, as one goes up, the other goes down. There's a negative correlation. And so, wow, this is really significant. But there were outlier churches. And these were spaces where their level of trauma was high, but they also experienced a high level of belonging and connection. They felt loved and included and valued, and this would be boys, which was less likely than girls otherwise, and kids from even non-Christian families. So you had boys and girls, but your most extreme situation would be a boy from a non-Christian family with a trauma history, struggles with behavior, and yet there's a church where they connect and they belong and they feel loved and valued. And so, right, that's a statistical outlier. And so that was how we launched the trauma study, which was qualitative to what is going on in these half dozen churches. Why are they breaking the rules that these kids
yeah.
feel
How are these
connected?
kids? Yeah, why are they sticking around?
What is going on? And so
Yeah.
that, when I talked about going to these places, that's what set the stage for this. I'm going to go there and look myself. I'm going to
And what
walk
did you
around.
see?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, did you get on a plane? I mean, did you
Yes.
you
Yeah.
literally physically?
He
Did both
literally
of you go?
physically flew
I
around. No, I was with the
physically,
kids.
yeah, she stayed
Yeah.
home, and I got an
Guys do it.
airplane and physically flew to these places. So there was some research in South America, mostly in the
Oh
US.
wow.
So
So you went
I was
all around the world.
all around. So I'm flying to these places to see what is going on. And so, I mean, there's a whole book about it, actually. Trauma Informed Children's Ministry, a practical guide to reaching
Yeah.
ideas.
Clearly, I didn't get very far into the book, but I apologize. Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, just a few things. I would notice things immediately. So I walk into a church and walking down the hallway, I see like framed pictures of the kids along the wall. Like, oh, well, this is interesting. Like
Mhm.
awards they've won, like attached to the wall. There was
Or they're
one where I go in
celebrating the kids. Yeah.
celebrating
Yeah.
them, their accomplishments. One I walk into and I find the children's pastor and she's making pancakes. And so every Sunday morning she shows up early because her volunteers they have kids of their own and they're trying to get out the door and they're there to serve. And it's hard if you're going to multiple services, you get up early, it's hard to make your kids a nice breakfast. So it wasn't just for the volunteers, it was for their kids too. So they began every Sunday, and some kids were bussed in from the community that didn't necessarily get food. So you had kids from tough situations, the kids of the volunteers themselves, all having pancakes together. Dr. Crosby, you
Wow.
want some pancakes? I'm like writing this down. I'm writing about the pancakes. Like, can't get my fingers syrupy when I'm trying to write about it. Um, I would watch things, worship services where they would take it very seriously, right? I'm seeing leaders interspersed with kids, and they have their hands raised and they're modeling worship right along with them. And
Mhm.
I see contemplative moments where
Mhm.
they say, okay, during this song, this is going to be a contemplative time and it's reverent, and they would explain what reverent means. And they'd say, if you can go to this space, go to this altar here on the left if you want to talk to Jesus alone, and go over here if you want to talk to Jesus with a friend. And I see a little boy go up and kneel, and then
Mhm.
these other boys, come and gather around him, and we find out that they were in a situation where they'd adopted a little sister, but then it looked like maybe they were going to lose her because of some situation at home. And he's terrified and crushed and panicked and depressed. And so his buddies are all gathered around him. And I'm hearing him talk about this. I felt like it wasn't just us, our family. I felt like our whole church is going through
Mhm.
this together. And I would see people teaching and elevating things and teaching them at a very high level, and kids walking out. I learned this Greek word today. I feel so smart. You've
Hmm.
got, yeah, I mean, you've got places where
Like,
there's
so a
some
real level of intergenerationality.
intergeneration was certainly in the mix. We saw churches that had a lot of resources making these elaborate sensory rooms. And there was
Hmm.
one where they had a huge, it was a mega church, and they had a huge, one of the biggest, a huge sensory room. And one of their things is, we'll take any kid,
What's
any
this?
kid.
What's a sensory room?
Oh man, that's a good question.
Oh, that is a good question.
So basically, it's a space where kids who, I mean, most directly are having sensory issues. So maybe they're overstimulated by certain things who come in.
Too loud, there's certain
Mhm.
smells, anything that has to do with our senses, and it's a safe room kids can go to help regulate their
They can
body.
calm
It's
down.
quieter, there's
Um,
different activities, that have to do with, like, maybe movement, that can help them feel regulated, safe, calm, connected.
they'd have adapted curriculum. Maybe you have children with intellectual disabilities who they wouldn't understand the normal lesson, but they're speaking into that. What shook me is they had this big space, and then the next door to it was this other big room, which was the volunteer. It was like the staff volunteer break room essentially, and this is for a mega church, so this is probably a 400 at least square foot break room. And they had one kid on the sensory room side who wasn't responding in that environment. It was still, I think the deal was he had some severe autism and it was just too much. So they demoed the break room, fridge, stove, everything, microwaves, chairs. They demoed it and gutted it and made a second sensory room for one kid.
Oh my
For
gosh.
one kid. Um, there was one of the pastors. This was a smaller case, a smaller church, and she put her personal cell phone number on every flyer for an event. And she said, if you need a ride, call me. I'll make sure you can get there. They had a bus, and there was a kid who was something had happened, and she thought she had a ride and she didn't. And they sent a bus, 30 minutes into the downtown to pick up one kid. So you see this extreme level of value attributed to the kids. They're cherished. There's space for them if they're angry. Hey, we have a couch upstairs. You can go upstairs and punch on the couch cushions if you need to, and we're gonna help walk through these challenges with you when you're having an interpersonal conflict. They knew them so well. They built
Mhm.
such close small groups where the same leader, there was one where a leader adopted a kid, And so he had a cohort, and I think there was something like 4
Like
or 5.
adopted a kid?
Yeah, he had adopted a child,
Okay.
and, so his kid is, I don't know, let's say in 2nd grade, and there's this
Okay.
whole other all the other boys that's in the 2nd grade boys small group, and so this same adopted dad followed them up, and they had Wednesday too, so every Sunday and every Wednesday for something like 5 years, he stayed with this same group of boys, and they had this incredibly tight-knit community, so when they walked through anything, they were safe, feeling vulnerable, and they could share, and they could cry together, and they were there for each other, and so there was so I mean, I followed up not that long ago. Now they're in college, and they're still really close, and the dad still has a relationship with all these boys, even in college, because of this foundation that was set. So that's just a few things that come. I mean, there's a whole book about it, actually, called
Yeah,
Trauma
there's a whole
Informed
book. Yeah.
Cascade Books.
Amazing.
Yeah, so there's just a smattering, but you'd walk into it and see it, and that's why I get home like, "Lori, I have to tell you
And then
what
we
I
would sit
saw."
and cry
Mhm.
and yeah, and then it was amazing.
Wow.
So
That's
we could
incredible.
tell you more about the statistical models, but we turn that into we do some experimental research. We'd create interventions and say, okay, now let's take that. Can we teach a church to do this, and then take measurements and see quantitative
Yeah.
shifts in trauma-informed readiness and the kids' dynamics, their ability. Like, we'd have a small group training where the kids actually, like, you could measure and to get survey data from the kids and actually
Yeah.
see that it's a more supportive environment. So there's experimental, there's quantitative, correlational, there's qualitative as well. So that's just kind of, I mean, it's over a decade of this, but that's just a rough idea.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. This has just been incredible. And if people want to get the book, we'll put the link in the show notes. But I'd love to ask one more question if I can. Just we spent so much time
Sure.
talking about your work.
Mhm.
I would love to hear you spend a lot of time doing really intense work with people and their intense stories. Uh, Outside of that, what is life like for you guys? What do you do when you're not talking about people's trauma?
Is there other things that people do?
Yeah.
I think it's just trauma.
I like bike
Yeah.
riding.
You like to be,
My son and I will go for bike rides, and we just started recently a ministry with
Mhm.
for my son, Trail Life USA, which is like a Christian version of Boy Scouts. So we started doing that. We went camping last weekend,
Mhm.
so
oh,
love
that's
to get
fun.
out and hike and camp and do
Mhm.
those things. And we've been remodeling our kitchen, so
Yeah.
that's been a lot recently.
We like to go and, do fun things. I love Disneyland. We're like
Disney
45 minutes from Disney.
travel.
So
So fun.
Disney, it's so
Are
fun.
you like members? Like you have a year-long membership kind of thing?
Yeah, I do.
Are you Disney
I'm a
people?
Disney adult, 100%. He's not.
I'm
He
not
absolutely is not.
I'm not
I
interested in it
wish
because it's
I pray
crowded and
for change.
expensive.
I pray for change.
Yeah, I
That's
like
right. Well, we can do another pivot episode when you've become a Disney person.
Great.
Yeah. We could
I
just
would
talk
love
about
to
that
go out
change.
and
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that,
It's me and the
yes.
kids. Me and the kids love it.
It's fine, I
It's
guess.
fine.
Once in a while. I would be, every 5 or 10 years would be plenty. Would be
Right.
plenty for me, but
Right.
Yeah.
it's not
I'm in Tennessee, so we're
Mhm.
Dollywood people. Yeah. I feel
Oh,
I
Oh,
feel about Dollywood like you feel about
we're in
Walt
Tennessee a
Walt
lot. We're
Disney.
in
yeah,
Nashville
we're
a
in
couple times. We
Tennessee.
were
Yeah,
just there.
just there.
Uh,
For
I'm in
for
Nashville,
CPAP.
so next time you're in Nashville, can we go have lunch and you can tell me about
Yes,
psychometrics?
that would be
Yeah,
awesome.
what was the
Yes.
Okay.
place we kept going to there, the barbecue? Edley's?
At least barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go there all the time. Not far from my
Yeah,
house.
we
Yeah.
don't have Edley's here. We always say Edley's when we're in town.
All right, we'll do it. We'll do it. It's on me.
Yeah.
Guys, thank
Appreciate
you so much for your time today. This has
Thank
been
you,
such a
Andrew.
treat.
Thank you. This was
it. You too.
awesome.
Thank you.
They are so cool. That was amazing. Guys, reachhurtingkids.com. That's where you can find the Reach Hurting Kids Institute. We didn't really get into the curriculums that you can download for your own churches or these bigger workshops that they do where you can go and learn from them directly. But you can find all that stuff on their website, and you should. There's all kinds of resources on their website. I'm looking at it right now as I'm talking to you, and it's just amazing. You can find all the research that Robert's done, and you can find out more about them and their team and all these workshops. And I'm so glad that there are people like Robert and Lori here doing this kind of work. Isn't that amazing? I'm just going to read for you what it says at the bottom of their website here. Reach Hurting Kids Institute represents a collective effort by Christian researchers, pastors, mental health practitioners, professors, authors, conference speakers, professional networks, and parachurch organizations to reach the hurting kids in our congregations and communities. Whew, that's amazing. You can get this bundle of 4 different modules, lifetime licenses, and all these things to train the people at your church. It's really affordable, and it looks amazing. This is so good. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today, listening, watching this podcast. If you liked it, please click like, subscribe, all the things. Please give us reviews any place you can do that. You can also leave a nice, happy review on Amazon for my book, if you've read it, How to Remember Forgotten Pathways to an Authentic Faith. If you haven't read it, you can do that. You can purchase that anywhere. The Rabbit Room, Amazon. That would be awesome. But mostly, thank you for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm sure you have. We'll be back next week with another great one. And for now, go do something awesome.